Then you had Fred, Shaggy, and Scooby.
Mm-hmm.
And when they would always split up, you would know Fred and Daphne had a thing, although they never openly said it. But they had a thing because they would always go together.
I thought they were.
Going, guys, how are you doing?
Hey, good.
Happy
Good.
Friday.
Enjoying this beer.
What are you
Having
drinking?
this Guinness Drought with coffee.
I am having a local beer, a Santa Fe Brewery Pepe Loco. It's a Mexican-style lager.
I love the wrestler's mask.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
All their
What was that
cans.
dude that he made a lot of films back in the 70s?
Santo.
Santo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the one with the white mask.
Yeah,
Mexican
it's
legend.
classic.
That's a
yeah.
legend. That's a
He's a
legend.
legend.
Right
They were
there.
like this, like 70s, like exploitation or like it was like the black exploitation films had like Black Belt Jones,
Yeah.
Superfly, and then he was the Mexican. Like
He's like our
He was,
Mexican superhero.
yeah,
he was-
he will kick people's asses
So
in
many
hotel
films.
rooms with a business suit and his mask on.
Yeah.
It was pretty
It's
cool.
like,
And he
what the
had
fuck?
like a suit and then a cape.
Yeah,
Like he would wear a cape.
he's
a
like
white
to the
cape.
rescue.
Yeah. He was like the Mexican version of Superman.
Yeah,
This is what we're talking about. It has a
logo.
mask. Wrestler's
Where did
mask.
all that sort of start, like the mask thing for wrestlers? I'm very curious. It seems to be like a Mexican tradition.
It's a Mexican tradition. I'm
I'm
100%
really
unaware on why. I just know it's an honor thing.
Yeah, like totally.
Like,
it's like
it's totally
that
an
mask is like it's iconic in Mexico.
It's not to like hide an identity. It's an honor thing. So like, the end goal of a wrestling match is to remove the mask from the other guy.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
Well, it's like what?
I see.
It's like
It's an unmasking.
yeah.
And it's more like each wrestler is more of a franchise, I like to think, because over
Yeah.
the years, it's like a beautiful tradition where the Dead started back in the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
And then it was followed by
The sun. The
like
son of the
there's
sun.
this really cool one that's called Máscara Sagrada. That was my favorite one. And he was like this kind of like Power Ranger looking wrestler. And then he had Mascarita Sagrada, which was I wouldn't think it was his son. Or maybe he was a little people, like a little guy, like a dwarf. But it's like it's been years upon years upon years, and I might be wrong, but these wrestlers are still around.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I remember that mask you had. It was pretty cool.
I had
That's
the
cool.
other one.
He had the like.
I had a collection.
You could go like to like the local market, and they had like a big selection of like all the wrestlers'
All the
masks.
wrestlers' masks. That's cool.
And like you would know, like it was like a collection, like a collectible. You're like, oh my god, it's this wrestler's mask.
Right.
It's like they have one mask they use for like lifetime. It's
Right,
like
that's
it's
their
like a
brand.
soccer team
It's
with their
it's their
jersey.
jersey.
It's
Yeah,
like
it's
their
their
jersey.
Yeah.
And it was pretty cool because I remember Aldo had one.
Did you like? I guess like you didn't really do Halloween, or did you in Chihuahua?
No, we
We
don't.
didn't really do
Don't
it.
really.
That
do it.
was-
It's like that.
I-
would be
I
the perfect
heard-
Halloween costume.
I heard
That was
nowadays
That
it's
was
like
sick.
that'd be the perfect Halloween costume
Right
for
now.
here.
For here
Yeah.
in New Mexico.
For here in the U.S.
Yeah.
You dress as your favorite Mexican wrestler in Mexico. It's like you're lame. Like you want to have. The thing about Mexico nowadays, it's like we're so attached to American pop culture. So
Yeah.
whatever's trending here, you want to do it over there.
Yeah.
Right.
Like you are. Let's see. Now that Halloween came out, this last Halloween,
Right.
everyone wanted to be Michael Myers.
That's
Same thing.
true.
Same
That's-
thing.
yeah.
Thing, dude.
Little
Say,
Michael Myers.
or when Suicide Squad came out and Harley Quinn, the
Yeah.
new Margot Robbie,
Yeah,
Harley
everyone
Quinn.
wanted to be-
Every girl wanted to be that here. The same applied down to Mexico. Like every cosplay, if it was a Halloween party, you'd have like 10, 20
Yeah.
Harley Quinns sitting there. So it's not cool to not fit in,
Yeah.
right? So
That's true.
I say like having a Mexican wrestler like attire here for a Halloween party in the U.S. is not just original, but it's like legendary. Like
Yeah.
Right.
because where the fuck do you get
It's
that
a
here?
reference to the culture.
Yeah, and
to the Mexican culture
It's like
that
being one of
influenced this culture. This was part of Mexico, but it's something that didn't translate over.
to get your
And yet-
hands on it is
There's a Netflix documentary about these guys.
About like Mexican wrestlers.
wrestlers. Yeah, I can't
Oh, yeah.
remember the name of it, but I remember coming across it. It might have been one wrestler in particular, but I remember seeing it.
Yeah.
Seeing that, I didn't watch it. But
my
I saw
parents
it.
took me to a wrestling match,
I've never
an
been to-
original live AAA, because that's what the wrestling league is in Mexico. It's like the WWE here. In fact, I think in some cases, sometimes like they've exported and imported wrestlers. You know, like
Right,
kind of
interesting.
like, yeah. So they took me to that, and it was hilarious because we were sitting there and we see the wrestling. You know, it's all act,
Mhm.
but it's still interesting how like they fly over and like they land on people.
Well,
and
it's like a
that.
circus, right?
They
Like, I've
launched.
never been.
They,
It's
lau-
outrageous.
they
Yeah,
launched one of
that's
the
cool.
midgets into the crowd, dude, and he landed like a couple freaking rows in front of me. It was hilarious. It's like catching the ball at a baseball game. It's
Like catching the little guy.
That's cute.
That's hilarious.
and that's where I got my first mask, actually.
Oh,
that-
I thought you got it from like a market or something.
No,
I didn't
sir.
even know
No,
that you went
sir.
to a rest.
no,
I was
sir.
probably not
That's
even
cool.
born yet.
Oh no! I was 4 or 5.
Yeah,
I was a
not
little
even
guy. I mean, it
planned.
mainly was because Dad thought it would be a cool idea to go see because it's like they were going to be there in Chihuahua. So
It's like and it's like
And
you
you-
look at it now. It's a one in a time opportunity.
it's like this.
because
You
that
see
can't
this.
see that
You
anymore.
see this in television. You see this in TV.
Mhm.
Oh look, the lucha libre's on, right?
Right.
And when they tell you, hey,
Lucha.
guess what? They're coming to our convention center. Get your tickets now.
It's like holy crap.
And this is before, like, I mean,
Yeah. This
if
is-
it was hard enough, if it's hard enough to get tickets on internet down in Mexico right now, imagine back then, like, you'd have to, like,
This is like the 90s.
Well, I remember.
it is late 90s.
Like,
It was 97, 98.
Oh God, guys! I remember buying tickets for concerts back in the.
No, but
you would have to go in
to,
line.
Well,
to
you
a
had to
booth,
go.
right?
I remember getting tickets for rock concerts. You had to go to the local. It was like a department store. It would be like going to Dillard's,
Right.
Oh, okay.
and there was like a will call. There was like this like in the back office at one of these department stores, like a
Yeah.
J.C. Penney or Dillard's. or
I didn't
Sears.
even know they're selling them.
Right, they have this like little spot in the back, in the admin section of the store, where you buy tickets. It was like that was their ticket master.
That was their reseller. Yeah.
And I remember standing in line there getting tickets
And
for
you would know, like, they're
You know,
selling
like-
them.
Black
and-
Sabbath and Judas Priest, all the hot bands at the time at the Philadelphia Spectrum.
Yeah.
which is where
And
I
getting
had some
them
tickets.
at the door was tough.
It was very hard. You didn't want to get them at the door because there were very few seats left.
So you
Together
wanna
or,
make sure
or
you're
good seats. Yeah, you
yeah.
wanted to get them ahead.
The good seats would always go to retailers.
Right, yeah, you wanted to go get them, weeks ahead.
And then you wouldn't even know they were selling them there, like,
Yeah,
unless
it
someone
was on
told
the
you.
radio,
You'd have to
Like,
ask
it
around,
was-
ask your buddies.
and they'd
hey,
say
do you
go
know
to
where I can
such
get-"
so and so, or you could call this number for
Like-
information.
It's like word of mouth.
You
Like,
look it up in the phone book under like tickets, things like that. They had ticket outlets. Then they started they had these ticket outlets that were standalones,
It's crazy.
like Ticketmaster.
Now that you
and
mention all
old
that,
school freaking marketing.
networking.
That's
we used to get
crazy.
Eagles tickets. I remember just from the guy at the sub shop, because guys would have people would have season tickets. Like business owners would buy season tickets for sporting events, and they'd have 2 or 3 seats. Sometimes they'd have a whole row, right? And they would sell them to people,
for a
for
long.
customers.
You want to go buy?
Because they didn't go to every game, and they certainly, or if they did, they had like several seats. And so they would sell them or gift them to their employees or whatever. So there was like a hoagie shop.
And it
Or
wasn't
I'd go to buy Eagles tickets back in the 80s for $40.
It wasn't so strict back in the day because now, like, every ticket needs to be named.
Yeah,
Like,
now
your
it's a
name
lot
has to be
harder.
on the ticket
Oh,
and,
that's
like,
to avoid resellers
identity.
because
and all that stuff. But then again, SeatGeek is a reseller.
Yes, it is a
Like
reseller,
Ticketmaster
but
is
we're
a
talking
reseller.
about people reselling tickets.
Yeah, these were business owners because businesses would buy.
They were
By-
licensed owners. They were
Right.
licensed resellers.
Well, that was before PSLs too.
Yeah, that's true.
This is before. Now that's a whole different thing. That came later. Literally, this people would just buy a whole row because you could buy the seats, right, and be on a yearly plan, season ticket plan. When your business paid for it, you could divvy them out any way you saw fit.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were empty. I remember going to games and the seats were bought and paid for, but there was nobody sitting there.
Right.
It was a sold out.
Because it's a business.
Sold out game, but there was nobody next to me because you knew like this whole row belonged to this business, and so sometimes you'd see people, sometimes you wouldn't.
It's a business. It's a business.
Oh, that's cool.
It didn't matter.
And then agencies came along because that's
Then
what
they
happens.
got PSLs, and then
Yeah.
now it's a totally different ballgame.
Because you could still do that with vacation packages, and you
Right.
could do that with
That's true with
Time
hotels.
shares.
hotels, timeshares,
Timeshares,
and stuff. Like, you can just get your travel agency license and place a bid at a hotel in Las Vegas, like Caesar's Palace or something, and say,
'Cause
"Hey,
you know,
I
like,
want to
with
buy
big
the
events
entire
coming in."
5th floor. What's the best deal you can give me?"
Right.
Like, okay, I'll give it to you for $50 a night.
Yeah.
And you go to Trivago or you go to Priceline or something, and you buy you book their room for the night, and it's $150, $200. And the thing is like these resellers, these agencies only paid $50 for them.
Wow.
And it's interesting, and I found that out a couple months ago when we went to Vegas because I bought tickets from this place on Trivago that outsourced the tickets to Mexico. It was a Mexican travel agency, so they were selling them in pesos. Obviously, their profit was a little bit, less because
The conversion.
and all that. So I found them for like $60, $70 a night on a weekend, right? And I said, okay, fine, I'm going to buy these tickets. For some reason, my card didn't get run. And I called the hotel and I said, hey, what happened? They said, oh, you didn't buy the tickets from us. I said, well, you didn't get the rooms from us. And I said, okay, well, can I book a room with you guys? They said, no, we're completely booked. We're sold out. We don't have any rooms available. But then you call the travel agency and the agency says, oh, yeah, there's like 20 rooms available. How many do you need?
Wow. See, yeah, they have some
She's like,
security.
so the hotel never loses.
So the hotel never loses.
That's
like
They're paid for,
crazy.
whether
They're
someone
paid
occupies
for
them or not.
exactly.
They have them for people last minute or special, VIPs or whatever.
Yeah, and you can't even do that. Like, you can't walk up to a hotel in Las Vegas and say, "Hey, I need a room for the night." It's super rare that they'll give you a room for the night on a nice hotel.
Yeah.
On a nice hotel, it's kind of rare because the majority of the rooms
They're already sold.
they're already sold to an agency for a fraction of the cost,
Okay, that makes sense.
which are essentially the resellers.
Right.
That makes sense on why the price
It's the art. It's the old art, ancient art of flipping for profit.
Right.
that makes sense. Like why the price fluctuates too, because let's say they get I don't know, like the whole 5th floor, like you said, for one weekend, and they know there's gonna be like a big artist performing, or like there's gonna be a big game at their stadium, so that's gonna bring a lot of tourists to the town.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the prices are gonna be a lot more than
Right. They can jack them up for.
And the weekend we went
drivers.
was Canelo's fight, the last fight
okay,
against
yeah.
Plant.
everything was so
Everything was
expensive.
sold out.
Everything was crazy
super
expensive.
expensive. It was just insane. I mean, the entire strip was literally a Mexican party.
Wow.
It was pretty cool,
That's
but it was
was.
really
Mexicans
expensive.
seem to get everywhere for like sporting events, no matter where they are in the world.
We support.
You all find a way to get there.
Yeah.
How is that?
I have no idea, but that's true. That
It
is
is
very
true.
true.
It is true. It's
I don't
like
know.
Like then they the World Cup was, where was it last time?
Russia.
Russia, right. And so they like Mexicans took over Russia.
We took over Russia. There was a
So
tequila shortage.
Maybe.
Anime?
No.
No.
I was when I was,
Okay.
when I
So
was
is
a
that
kid.
like Pokemon? Is that
This is like
Yeah,
Chinese
so-
cartoon, no?
Japanese.
cartoons?
Yeah, there was actually a couple of really good movies. I remember
Well, Dragon Ball, that's
back in the day.
Well, Tom's way before Dragon Ball.
Yeah, I know, but I'm sure, like, you know about it, right? Dragon Ball?
Tom's
Dragon
more
Ball
about He-Man. Tom
Oh,
is
that's-
the
What's a cartoon that you would
Tom's
watch,
the
like, when you were...
Thundercats.
No, go way back.
You go way back.
Ultraman.
Ultraman.
Johnny Sacco and his flying robot.
Yes.
God, that's cool.
What else? What else was there back in the day? Yeah, Johnny Sacco, Ultraman. Those were the Japanese superhero
Pink
films
Panther.
before. And then like there was like all kinds of like stuff that was Tom and Jerry, but a lot of it was reruns, like Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry.
Tom and Jerry is amazing.
Though what was running at the time I was actively watching, back in the 70s was like the old Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby. Remember
Yeah.
that? And like the Night Stalker, which was a prelude to like the X-Files, which
Never heard of it.
is 90s still. I think you probably wouldn't remember that either. What else was running back then? Like Happy Days.
Happy Days?
That shit. And Laverne
What was
and Shirley.
Happy Days, though?
Happy Days with the Fonz.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Henry Winkler. Yeah, that was running in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a lot of reruns too, like from the 50s and 60s. Like some of the old Tom and Jerry, Looney Tunes, things like that were made in the 60s, 50s, and 60s.
Were you in the era of Pink Panther?
Yeah, some of that had. They were making those films when I was very young, and then up until I was, a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Sellers was making them.
It was what, like Pink Panther, and then
Chuck Jones.
Chuck Jones.
What's the little blue guys?
Smurfs.
The
No, that was at that point.
That's
I was
80s.
Is that 80s?
That's 80s.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
I was
you were
too old for that kind of stuff.
you're already like playing hockey outside.
Yeah, I was drinking and going to parties, and
You're already
I was in
getting
the military. Yeah, so it was.
trashed.
Yeah, at that point I was done with cartoons and most TV because I wasn't really watching. A big part of the 80s, I just didn't watch shit at all.
What's that TV show with
I watched movies.
Mescalito?
Oh, HR Puffin stuff.
Yeah.
HR Puffins.
Now that again that ran in the late 60s, so I was very young, but I remember some of that there were reruns in the mid 70s. Yeah, he was actually, he was supposed to be a dragon, I think. But he looked
looks
more
like
like
Mescalito.
a mescalito.
But it was in a lot of reference to fucking
Drugs.
psychedelics.
Yeah. HR Puffin stuff was can't do a little because you can't get
and
enough.
stuff.
It was about marijuana.
Makes
Smoking weed. And there are all these drug references. And he looked like, he could be like some kind of a mushroom god or mescaline god or peyote god.
ScoobyDoo.
Definitely. Now I remember
is
that.
really
Again, they were making them, but most of them had been made. So what I was watching then in the 70s were reruns still.
New
But they were-
Scooby-Doo is nothing like
Not
original
like-
Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
It is
Shaggy
it
was
is
stoned
high,
all the
high
time.
reference to them being, stoned.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to
Shaggy
a point where
was
you
like,
are
yeah,
eating
yeah.
Scooby snacks, like which are dog treats, and
Oh,
talking to your dog.
Yeah.
No,
Going
and then
around
the way
town.
he would act is just like so mellow. Bless yourself.
Yeah, that was a total trip. I mean, a lot of those shows in the early 70s had a lot of drug references, and I think that was because at the time
shrooms.
the executives didn't understand because a lot of the young
Well, it was
writers
normal. It was
were hippies, and they were making and burying these references. They were making these references,
And no one cared. No one
and the
noticed.
executives were too fucking square to realize what was going on,
That's so cool.
and so
Like-
they were able to
They were rebels, dude.
thread in all these references, and it was like later oh shit, now
They're like,
realize.
we live this on TV.
Yeah. So there were the boomers were young. up and coming professionals back then, right? They were the youth, the creative youth doing all this back then and subverting the
That's so
authority.
cool.
So yeah, all that stuff was cool. I mean, I was a young kid growing up with all that. So
But you don't get these references as a kid. You don't know.
you don't.
I was
No,
watching.
had no
it's,
idea.
it's these hidden references.
But by the
to-
time I was, old enough to realize what
right.
marijuana
But it's
was.
these hidden references to attract parents into
We
watching
were
that too.
watching SpongeBob the other day,
Yeah.
and we were catching so many stuff like that. I was like, I
Yeah.
can't believe I watched this when I was.
Well, nowadays
10,
it's
8 years
it's
old.
all like what out in the open. But I mean, it is and it isn't. I think it's like things are so
No, but-
carefully constructed.
But
now,
what I've
respect
heard is that they've been doing that to cartoons. They add like little subtle
Yeah,
like dark jokes and little subtle adult jokes and like adult references that a kid won't
Disney does that
understand.
all the time.
Just
Kids
so
won't
so the
understand.
parent can bear sitting through them while the kid is watching. Because
Yeah,
I don't know, like some people only had one TV growing up. Just their living room TV
that's it.
and the kid wants to watch this and it's like little treats for
And
the
you
parents to
didn't
say,
have rewind.
hang in there, dads, or hang in there, moms. We're almost done with this show, but here's something. There's a little bit of entertainment for you while your little rascal finishes the show.
Right.
So it's like
Yeah.
little pieces.
Oh, there's
to
always that to appeal to adults, but then there's all these little hidden messages that are and sometimes sexual or drug references. Remember, there was one Disney film that had an LSD molecule as a
Oh yeah,
bookshelf. I mean,
it was House of Mickey.
Yeah.
It was House of
It
Mickey.
was an LSD molecule.
Yeah, it's literally the molecule of LSD
That's so
on the
cool.
wall. It's like, and it's a TV show that my daughter watches. You know how it's hilarious.
Yeah, like we were watching SpongeBob, and they have some pretty like dark jokes
Yeah,
that a kid
yeah,
is.
SpongeBob definitely.
The kid is watching it, hears the joke, doesn't even know what the hell's happening. It's like, yeah, okay. Like, they don't even laugh because they don't get it's a joke. They don't even
It's
pay
subliminal,
attention.
so this is
So,
all conditioning.
It just kind of like passes
Or
through
later.
their mind. And then all of them were like cracking up because of the dark jokes. I was like, how do they.
But I think you're right.
do
Maybe
this?
it is for the adults sitting there watching it along with the kid. They have to have something to keep the parents engaged.
Yeah. It's because, yeah.
So that's
like,
smart.
Mm-hmm.
It is smart.
But
That's
Scooby Doo was like straight up like,
Oh my god.
Scooby-Doo was
you know, you
really
had
straightforward.
two very hot girls, Daphne and Velma. Then you had Fred, Shaggy, and Scooby.
Mhm.
And when they would always split up, you would know Fred and Daphne had a thing, although they never openly said it, but they had a thing because they would always go together.
I thought they were husband and wife.
No, I mean they can't because they're kids. They're supposedly teenagers or
they're
Right.
kids?
yeah.
But they were a love interest.
Oh yeah, no, and it's like they always
Freddy was giving Daphne, or what's her name?
Daphne.
Daphne?
Yeah.
No, that's the one with the glasses.
No, that's Velma.
That's Velma?
Velma had the glasses and the turtleneck, maybe.
Oh,
Yeah, the
okay,
orange
okay.
turtleneck.
Yeah. It's things we remember, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. And Shaggy, what did he have? A green T-shirt.
And brown
And
bell-bottom pants.
Yeah. The other guy had a white shirt with blue jeans, right?
He had like the
And an orange
Like a
handkerchief.
little.
yeah.
Yeah.
I forget what they call that.
And then Daphne was always wearing purple because she was always like, just like the girly girl, the diva.
Right. Yeah,
Another- the
they were
freaking
such beatniks, actually.
This other guy was
They
a
weren't
frat
even
boy.
hippies. They were beatniks.
Well, only Shaggy was the hippie. Velma
No,
was
he
a
wasn't
nerd.
even a hippie. There was beatnik. Because that actually, the beatnik culture predates the hippie culture.
Okay. Well, yeah,
and
that,
some, like ScoobyDoo, is a beatnik phrase. And it's
Oh.
based on scat. Scat is a language that the African American jazz musicians came up with. and it's something that you see in the music, jazz music, and it's like a vocal. It's just it's kind of like its own language, and people sing in scat.
Mm-hmm.
And ScoobyDoo is definitely it's a scat phrase.
Scooby.
And the Beatniks kind of adopted that. And they were the ones, they had the goatees and the berets.
Oh,
So they were a more sophisticated version of a hippie, and they read a lot. They were intellectuals.
well, Shaggy was stupid as hell.
Well, Shaggy was kind of a dopey beatnik.
He was burnt.
But they did
super
smoke
burnt.
a lot
He
of
was super
marijuana.
burnt.
They used LSD.
And the references on why they're always hungry, like
Yeah.
always hungry, they're always eating.
So mellow, so
But it
like
was different.
lit.
Like
It's
the
the munchies, man.
the hippie culture kind of evolved out of that. But it was a lot more. The hippie culture was a lot more wanton and then just experimental, and I think they took things in a variety,
Yeah.
directions. And it was a little wilder,
Right.
a little more unpredictable, whereas the Beatniks were a little more reserved, more focused. But like hippies were basically known for being sort of out of control. But it's all kind of the same thing at the root there. Shaggy, I guess, would be kind of like, sort of an amalgam of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he was kind of sloppy, but also that whole thing was the idea of even growing your hair over your ears was pretty radical. And a lot of that movement came out of post-World War II. The baby boomers was the first generation in this country's history where the youth had a quality of life, unlike their parents, grandparents. Because up to that point, life was incredibly difficult for every generation.
Mm-hmm.
Going back, hundreds of years, right? There was no stability. There were wars, whether they be like domestic wars, like wars with indigenous people, Civil War. Then we had world wars,
Right.
and we weren't a superpower yet. So we had a struggling economy. We had an industrial revolution, and that laid the seeds for the economic prosperity that we grew into. But that had to be built, right? And it was very difficult. We still, although African Americans were free, they still hadn't achieved any kind of status as first-class citizens yet. Women hadn't. I mean, up until like the 50s, life was incredibly difficult for most people.
Yeah.
Whether you're white or black, doesn't matter. So that generation that grew up in the 50s was the first time that they actually had a standard of living that was relatively comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And they realized, in a sense, like it was like a domestication or a taming of our youth, of the human spirit, and they rejected it. In part because there was nothing to fight for anymore.
Right.
It's like we had achieved our status as a successful civilization, right? We achieved first world status, and the kids were bored, so they had to rebel against something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it's in our nature to want to break out of this sort of, and we were becoming sort of cookie cuttered. The suburbs were being developed, and the houses looked the same, and everything was you had mass production, and everything was just kind of, things were cheaper as a result of that, but everything was the same, and people were like, prior to that, everything was different.
Sounds a lot like the snowflake culture.
Right, that was basically, and they rejected it though, and that's what led to these movements like the Beatnik movement, the hippie movement, Rebel Without a Cause. You know, the James Dean film, the very famous James Dean film, was based on the work of somebody who studied this phenomenon in American youth. So kids were, you know, being different than their parents, growing their hair a little longer, not shaving. You know, people were taking intoxicants already. They were already doing that. Not everywhere, but I mean, you could buy weed still. And weed was legal. LSD was legal. It was all legal. It wasn't prohibited until the 70s.
Yeah.
That's when it reached prohibition status in the early 70s. But it was just kind of this radical departure from like this sort of. It's interesting because we worked so hard as a civilization to create, in a sense, a safe space for our youth to grow up in, to create this sort of consistency.
Yeah.
That we figure we could thrive in because people were safe, and when you're safe, I guess, you know, the idea was, or the thinking was, that you would thrive.
Right.
But I think what we realize now is you need a little bit of a challenge. You can't make things too easy. And I think things were getting too easy, becoming too easy. And the generations, the young generation was like, wait a minute. You know, people were becoming insular. And there obviously were still populations that weren't benefiting as much, like African Americans and women and other minorities still weren't benefiting yet the way white Americans were.
White male Americans?
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting, they were, you know, I guess on some level sensed this, and then there was a pushback, and that became the counterculture.
Yeah.
And so, like, Shaggy's like this dude with, you know, he literally is. He got a beard, and he's got
always had like
hair over his ears.
I always had a feeling he was the son of rich parents. I don't know if they ever disclosed who he was, but I feel like they were all.
This is the
sons
thing.
of rich parents.
Yeah.
These were all the children of at least middle class parents, because
they had to be rich because they were kids. They have Volkswagen bus. They travel all over. And they don't work, they don't do anything, but yet somehow always have nice things.
Yeah.
And obviously, so.
They could have been. There was a lot of that, right? And there still is. Trust funders, right? But a lot of this was actually a middle class uprising.
Yeah.
More so than a wealth upper class uprising. I think for the upper class, they tended to want to maintain their status, and there was a certain look you had to sustain and maintain, and they did that. They didn't.
Yeah,
They didn't rebel. Some did, but very few rejected or rebelled against that because it's just the way things always were for their family, and it's the way things were. But a lot of them did. Some of them did, but most of it, the majority of the counterculture, were middle class kids. Middle class.
Yeah, that's true. Because like higher class.
There's just certain things, you know, otherwise you'd get disowned. And I mean, I'm sure it happened.
Yeah.
There were a few
rebel kids.
Yeah, there's a few examples of that. More than a few, but the majority of it was middle class.
Yeah, I imagine like high class back in the day, like the son was working at the father's business since a really young age, just so they can like start taking
an image,
care of it,
status,
and then they can keep their wealth and all that.
You went to the right colleges, and you whatever it is you chose to do with your life.
It's not like nowadays.
In a sense, predetermined, and that was something that it certainly didn't suck. So why? And you always had these families who've always lived this way. Whereas it's interesting, the middle class, that struggle to create some normalcy and some consistency and stability. They're the kids that are like, you know what? I don't fucking want this.
Yeah.
And part because there were so many of them. Baby boomers are a lot of them. It's the largest mass of humanity to move through history. And they were just like, there was so many of them, and it was just like this group thing where they were just like, there's something basically wrong with what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's
That's
too
true.
it's too engineered. Our existence is too engineered. We want to be a little more creative about how we live our lives, and so that led to the beatniks and the hippies, and the counterculture.
Interesting.
And literally the way they looked, and you can look at some of the old films, some of the early Brando films, and James Dean, where they wore white T-shirts and black leather jackets,
Yeah.
and
Cool.
blue jeans,
And the Chuck
Like
Taylors.
spiky hair.
where they wore black
The
leather
Chucks.
boots, and
Black
they
leather
had
boots or Chuck
they had
Taylors.
their hair slicked back, or they had, and it was somewhat
They
long,
were
and they
like-
had beards or growth, and they
The
looked-
little collar, like, standing up.
yeah,
And always a pocket knife.
yeah, it was like, you saw that Indiana Jones film that was at the Crystal Skull, remember?
Yeah.
And so Shia LaBeouf's character was the rebel. He was, and then Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones was the academic proper, and then here was his son. He's riding a motorcycle
Yeah.
and leather jacket. He's like, "What's wrong with you, kid?" And that was where that started. That generation,
Right.
Because he had that look. He was rebelling,
That's cool.
and that's where it started.
That's really
Then they had their language, like, "Hey, you," it was a beatnik.
Hey, you,
language.
boy.
It was scat. ScoobyDoo was a scat phrase.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that's where all that came from. It's
Yeah.
just born out of this interesting an era of prosperity.
So don't forget to follow us, like, and comment. Anything else, guys?
No, just have a safe and wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Ka-chow!
Rebels, unite.